By the time the parole officer finally wrestled her down into my rhododendrons, she had already charged across my front yard, screaming that I had no right to be there. "This place is supposed to be condemned," Janice Weller bellowed, ex-HOA president, freshly released felon, and undisputed champion of catastrophically poor life choices. Her court-ordered ankle bracelet gave a sad, frantic beep 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 as the signal died. Clearly never designed for full-contact tackles against the guy whose courtroom testimony had put her away. I stayed right where I was, perched on my porch steps, coffee in hand, enjoying the show while she thrashed in the bushes and the audience half the new HOA board. A couple of parole agents and 3 thoroughly baffled neighbors watched in stunned silence. She twisted around, twigs tangled in her hair, and fixed me with the glare sharp enough to strip paint. "You were supposed to be gone, Daniel," she spat. I raised my mug in a lazy salute. Funny thing about property deeds, Janice, they don't vanish just because the previous owner goes to prison. My name is Daniel Cross, and I live in a cedar cabin that the HOA insists on calling a rustic single-family enhancement opportunity. It sits on the ragged edge of Pine Hollow Preserve, which is real estate jargon for, you're allowed to look at trees, as long as they're the correct trees, trimmed into the correct shapes, sporting only board-approved foliage. I bought the place precisely because it was shoved as far from the cul-de-sac McMansions as the plat map allowed, half swallowed by pines, a creek gurgling behind it, far enough away that I could pretend I didn't actually live in a suburb with covenants. Then came Janice Weller, at the time reigning monarch of the Pine Hollow Preserve Homeowners Association. Janice radiated the frantic energy of someone who had the bylaws professionally bound and kept extra copies in her glove box. Her hair was always wrenched back into a bun so severe it looked like it filed its own taxes. The day I moved in, she appeared on my doorstep clutching a welcome basket in one hand and a tape measure in the other. "We don't typically permit cabins," she said, eyeing my walls like the cedar might be contagious. "But since yours is pre-existing, we'll simply need to bring it into aesthetic compliance." I told her a cabin in the woods kind of was the aesthetic. She smiled the way a cat smiles at a broken vase. "We'll see about that." 3 months later, she declared total war. It started gently, polite little notices slid under the door. "Your firewood stack requires an approved enclosure. Your porch light is the wrong Kelvin. All bulbs must be HOA mandated soft white 2,700,000. Unpermitted wildlife activity detected. Please remedy immediately." The wildlife was a raccoon named Pete. Pete had never read the covenants and didn't plan to start. Then it got weird. I caught her at night, creeping through the trees with a flashlight, photographing my roofline, pacing the distance from foundation to creek with a laser measure, like she was surveying for the pyramids. In email, as she began calling it the shack, she circulated a photoshopped rendering of my cabin repainted in mandatory neighborhood taupe, complete with vinyl siding and a sad little HOA-approved shutter. When I pointed out that county records listed it as my legal primary residence, she escalated fake violations, daily fines, threats of liens, mandatory architectural review boards that met at dawn. When none of that budged me, she went full supervillain. She filed anonymous complaints claiming my 100-year-old wiring was a fire hazard, and my wood stove violated modern code. The county inspector showed up, walked through once, and told me, "This is the safest house I've seen all week." He signed the report with a bye, satisfied flourish, and left. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it gave Janice a terrible new idea. If she couldn't get the place condemned legitimately, she'd just fake something condemnable. One February night, the power at my cabin went out, only my cabin, while the wind screamed through the pines like a horror movie soundtrack. I grabbed a flashlight, went to the breaker box, and found the lock clipped, the panel hanging open, the main feed ripped out in a way that no squirrel or storm could ever manage. And there, nailed to a tree at the edge of the road, was a cheap battery-powered security camera pointed straight at my front door, the kind paranoid people buy because they're scared of porch pirates. The next morning, sheriff's deputy knocked. "Got a report you bypassed the meter, and you're stealing electricity from the HOA grid," he said, sounding embarrassed to even repeat it. I glanced at the complaint form. Complainant, Weller Janice. I walked him to the box, showed him the cut lock and the yanked cables. He winced. Whoever called this innocent really bright. That's vandalism, not theft. He took pictures, wrote it up, and asked if I had cameras of my own yet. Not yet, I told him. Give me until this afternoon. What Janice never found out was that I installed them that same day, one on the eaves, one hidden in the pines by the road, one covering the footpath from the cul-de-sac. 3 weeks later, when the sheriff came back, this time with a search warrant, because Janice had sworn I was running a meth lab in the woods, I was ready. I handed him a flash drive and invited him to pull up a chair. There's no meth lab, I told the sheriff, handing over the remote so he could watch in HD. Just your star witness committing what my lawyer later called a greatest hits album of felonies. The footage rolled. Janice at 2:14 am, snipping my breaker box lock with bolt cutters. Janice at 2:27 am, stuffing a suspicious plastic bag under my firewood like she was hiding Easter eggs for the D. Janice at 2:41 am on her burner phone in her running SUV, whispering sweet nothings to 911. The deputy's jaw got tighter with every time stomp. Yeah, he finally said, ejecting the drive like it was radioactive. That's evidence tampering, false report. Vandalism, the full buffet. 2 months late, Janice was convicted on every count the prosecutor could stack. Filing false reports, tampering, vandalism, stalking, and harassment. The judge listened to her tearful speech about protecting community standards, then sentenced her to 3 years in state prison without a flicker of sympathy. Everyone, including Janice, assumed the cabin would be gone long before she walked free. Everyone was wrong. Fast forward 3 years. Pine Hollow Preserve had mellowed. The new board spent meetings arguing over mulch colors and whether the pool needed new noodles. My cabin became the neighborhood mascot, the cool historic one realtors brag about. I upgraded the roof, added solar, and installed a rocking chair that creaked like it was paid to intimidate solicitors. Then Marcus Ng, the new HOA president and a man who actually had a life, sent the email nobody wanted. Friendly reminder, former resident Janice Weller was released on parole yesterday. Her registered address is in county. Report anything weird. 2 days later, I heard that familiar asthmatic muffler, beige SUV erected from whatever junkyard hell it had been resting in. Janice stepped out. Thinner, hair hacked short, cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, ankle monitor blinking like a budget disco ball. She stared at my cabin like reality had personally betrayed her. In her heart, she'd come home to a vacant lot and tasteful native grasses. Instead, she got fresh cedar stain, gleaming solar panels, my truck in the drive, and me on the porch with coffee. Her face cycled denial, bargaining rage in Olympic record time. What are you doing here? She barked, stomping up the path. Living in my house, I said pleasantly. You're violating parole in under 6 minutes. New personal best. I was told this blight would be removed. She snapped. This neighborhood was supposed to be brought into compliance. Janice, you pled guilty to felony tampering on this exact property. You're not allowed within 300 feet of me or it. Remember the paperwork you signed with the crayon? That was mistake number 2. He kept coming. This community is mine, Daniel. That shack is an embarrassment. You never deserved. My phone was already recording. My other hand was already speed dialing. Hey, Officer Ramirez, I said the second he picked up. Daniel Cross. Guess who just crossed my property line like it's Black Friday at Walmart? 10 minutes late. We had a block party. 2 patrol cars, Ramirez and his partner, the entire new HOA board, and 3 neighbors who dragged actual lawn chairs to the curb. Pine Hollow doesn't have cable. We improvise. Janice was mid-rant on my front walk, arms flailing, ankle monitor beeping in protest. You don't understand, she shrieked at Ramirez. This man destroyed community integrity. His testimony was biased. He's always been hostile to proper governance. Ramirez stayed cool. Ma'am, your parole conditions forbid any contact with Mr. Cross, his residence, or the HOA in any official capacity. Did you read the terms? Those terms are based on lies. The board had a remediation plan. Marcus cleared his throat and held up the updated covenant binder like it was the 10 Commandments. Small correction. Last year, we voted to designate the cabin an official historic rustic feature. Page 4, subsection C. Realtors love it. Raised everybody's values. The neighbors snorted. Janice looked like someone had slapped her with a wet pool noodle. You legitimized that shack? Gave it character, Marcus said, shrugging. People pay extra for character. Ramirez turned to me. You mentioned video? I aired it on the big screen. Well, my phone, held high. Janice, marching past 3 separate no trespassing signs, crossing the line, getting in my face, threatening to finish what we started. Janice lunged for the phone. Mistake number 3. Ramirez took her down smoothly and fast. 1 second, she was screeching about architectural review. The next, she was eating rhododendron, wrist zipped, ankle monitor screaming like it had seen its own future. You can't do this. She howled into the dirt. I'm the president. Of what exactly? Marcus asked. The Ministry of Regret? The block erupted. Nobody moved to help her up. Ramirez listed the new charges like he was reading a grocery list. Parole violation, restraining order violation, harassment. And because the prior convictions were tied to the same victim this time, the judge was really going to throw the book. They stood her up. Her eyes found mine, wild, pleading, furious. You were supposed to be gone, she whispered. Nah, I said, taking a calm sip of coffee. I pay my taxes. You torch your own life. Different hobbies. They loaded her into the cruiser. The ankle monitor flashed red through the back window like a tiny, pathetic lighthouse guiding her straight back to prison. 2 weeks late. Marcus sent the victory email. Date. Parole revoked. Additional 5-year sentence imposed. As a special condition, Janice Weller is permanently prohibited for life from serving on, advising, or participating in any homeowners association, condo board, or similar entity. The judge actually used the phrase, lifetime ban from all HOA activities, like it was the cherry on top. Janice sat in the defendant's chair, mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. While the gavel fell, the woman who once measured my chimney with a laser pointer had just been sentenced to the one thing worse than more prison. Permanent exile from the only kingdom she ever cared about, and somewhere in Pine Hollow Preserve. A raccoon named Pete knocked over a perfectly compliant trash can, just to keep the vibes right.